It's impossible for an 18-year-old to buy an investment property in 2025. Or is it?
Don't just focus on getting to 10, focus on having really good quality properties.
Keep focusing on increasing your income because as a first-time buyer, that's really important.
This episode, we assemble a team of 3 property experts to help an 18-year-old apprentice become a property investor. Meet Lachie, 18 years old, works full-time and has been diligently saving, who has his sights firmly set on building a property portfolio.
Mum and I would go to discount stores and make frozen meals for the week. Really eye-opening now to look back at that.
We're putting him in front of experts, not as a client, but to mentor him from 3 totally different angles. You're officially the youngest person to ever sit in that chair. Starting with accountant, property investor, and founder of Tradie Partners, Jeremy Iannuzzelli.
First 1 or 2 properties that we buy, I'd like to see this being purchased individually.
Next, moving to property investor, founder of Full Circle Finance, and mortgage broker, Morgan Bushell.
Between the 2 investing options, the one that actually helped him get the most was where we'd kind of end up at about a $550K purchase price.
And finally, the man with a gigantic portfolio and founder of House Finder, Simon Liu.
Adelaide, where there is still a lot of areas where they're undervalued. The most important thing I can probably say to you now is
by the end of this episode, we're aiming to get 18-year-old Lachie, who is an apprentice, into becoming a property investor. If you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s and thought property investing was just impossible, get ready to take notes, listen close, and share this with a friend that might have the same feeling. Because the expert guidance that this young man is about to put into action, you're about to watch all of it too. My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and let's get straight into the chat with Lachie. Lachie Goodrich, how you going, man?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me here today.
Mate, do you know you're officially the youngest person to ever sit in that chair?
No, but it's a really good feeling to know.
Mate, it's good to see you here. When I originally got the call about potentially making this episode together, I was pumped, but there was a little bit of me that was kind of like, all right, is this just kind of like supportive parent vibes? What is this? But then I met you and I realized it wasn't just supportive parents. You've got a drive in you, mate.
Yeah, I was extremely lucky with how much I was at work so much of the time that we were still able to get hold of you and make today happen.
Absolutely, man. And there's a few things that I want to dig into before we actually start the journey and start talking with Jeremy first, Jeremy Iannuzzelli, accountant. Then we're going to be talking with Morgan Bushell, broker. And then we're going to be talking with Simon Liu, who's a buyer's agent. Now, you've already had a couple of chats with these guys off air over the phone?
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a little bit of stuff that's been really the foundations laid, but really we're going to be digging deeper into what are the questions we should be asking to the next professional and really understanding a little bit more of the do's and don'ts for you. But can we actually just really set the story? Because this is not common, Lachie, and in all the best ways, not common. Like, why? Why do you even want to do this at such a young age? Why aren't you out partying?
So it just started when I was 15. I was very keen to get a job and make myself useful. And then with all that, it just came all the money. And then my parents were like, you work so much and you're making extremely good money for your age. What do you want to do with it? And at that point, I wasn't sure. And then I kind of started really listening to people that had good wealth behind them and then find out one of the best ways that a lot of people deal with their money is through property. And ever since I've seen a lot of people look into property, it was such an eye-opener because trades and stuff like that is something I've always loved and being able to work and fix things myself. So it was kind of both worlds colliding in a perfect way.
And so you're a second-year apprentice now, yeah?
Oh, yeah, soon to be.
Okay, and you just turned 18 how long ago? It was like 6 months ago?
2 months ago.
Two months ago. Okay, so very freshly 18. Okay, and now you were saying that there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. You were earning really good money. What was really good money?
So when I was 15, I think I was working part-time at Foodland, full-time at school, and I was getting about $400 or $500 a week.
Part-time at Foodland,
yep.
And you were full-time at school. And what were you on an hour then? Would it have been like $12 an hour or something?
Yeah, it would have been around the $14, $15 mark.
$14, $15 an hour. Okay.
I was doing 4 shifts a week there.
And did you doing like night fill or?
Yeah, so after school and then I do Saturday, Sunday.
Okay. And so were you spending all your money to begin with and then mum kind of stepped in and went, hey, maybe save this? Or were you saving it from the beginning?
I was saving a lot of it, but I wasn't saving it for a long-term goal in mind. I was kind of saving it, and then if I ever wanted to buy a dirt bike or buy a car, the money was there.
Dirt bike's your thing?
Yeah, a little bit. It was something I was more excited to get into when I was younger. Mum was very stuck on the point that if I was going to save my money, save it to something I was looking forward to and find a reason to save, because otherwise you won't save near as much.
Okay, and so then then you had family friends that basically said, hey, I've got a few rental properties, and you're looking at them going, okay, your life looks all right. Maybe that's the way.
Yeah, so one of the big eye-openers I had was a lot of family friends and I making good money at their jobs, but then making more money doing property and renovations and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed helping them, not even for the money of it, just for learning how they do it and what the steps are. And then ever since I learned how to do it, it was like the physical work. It was just more about the money side and how do I start this goal early.
And just to be clear, you're not an eastern suburbs kid, mum and dad worth hundreds of millions of dollars or anything crazy. Like when you talk about a few people that you know that have got some property and renovation, we're still talking at what, a somewhat modest level, or like what, just so we can sort of gauge?
Yeah, some sort of low income areas like Hacken, but very mediocre, medium houses. Mum and I definitely didn't grow up on the nice eastern suburbs. I remember very young, Mum and I would always look for the cheapest things. It was like always the cheapest car with curtain airbags. I remember Mum would not buy a car without one. We went without a car.
Safety
for a while.
first.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember every Sunday, Mum and I would go discount stores and make frozen meals for the week. It was really eye-opening now to look back at that.
You'll find that that's a lot of the time some of the basis for the decisions that you're making now. And it's it can go in one of two ways. And obviously it's gone in the direction that it's going in right now for you. But some people take that as this is life, so just keep going. Yeah. And other people take it as could we make things better?
Yeah.
And obviously that's the path you're choosing to walk down.
Yeah, 100%. It was my mum definitely living at my grandma's house, and my mum looking for every bit of money she can get and work as much hours she can. And then as soon as I became the age that I could start working, it was definitely...
What age was that?
I reckon it was very young. I probably started helping one of my uncles do gyprocking at probably 13, 14, on school holidays and stuff like that. And then I got my first full-time, part-time job at Foodland at 15.
That's awesome. Okay. And so then tying us back to, that's when you started earning about $300-400 a week?
Yeah.
You're still going to school full time. You're not at school now though. You're a full time apprentice.
Yep. As of 2 weeks ago.
As of 2 weeks ago. So you were fresh out of high school.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now I'm just wanting to really set the stage of everything here, mate. As far as the savings is concerned now, what have you got in the bank? What have you saved?
So altogether, I'm looking at around 84,000 in savings, but that's locked savings. So I just put it away every week, and I can't just dip into it, which is something that I've found helped me heaps, because it was if I were to go out, I'd have no money in my everyday spending, but then I'd have $80,000 in locked savings, and no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't just chip into that and then buy myself dinner or something like that. And that's helped me a lot.
Can you open up the term locked savings? What do you mean by that?
Mum and I, when we started it, we made it locked. So I can see the money, I can see the transaction history, but for me to go and get money out of that account, I'd need to go down to a local branch and sit down and sign saying I'm opening up this bank account and spending money of it.
So you've got steps in the barriers in the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can't just chip into it.
Did you ever crack?
No, I still haven't.
Good man. That's good. Okay, so $84,000.
Yeah.
All right, and that's big in anyone's eyes. If you're 30 and you've got $84,000 in savings, amazing. 40, 50, and to have that now at 18, what is that? So you've been saving 20-ish grand a year, roughly, which is about $400 a week.
Yeah, it's 95% of my wage, which looks around about $1,200 every week. So this was worked out after the past 9 months.
Yeah.
It's about 89% of my gross I put into savings every week, which is just under $1,100 every week.
That's huge, Lachie.
Yeah.
Okay, $1,100 every week. What are you doing for fun? Because I can already see the comments being typed of, yeah, this is all well and good, but he's not going to have any fun in his 20s. What are you doing?
So it works out extremely well because a few of my other mates, none of us see each other on weekends. Mm. Our weekends are Mondays. A few of my mates work in retail, and Monday is the day they're closed. Okay. So every Monday night we'll all get together and go out for dinner and just have a chat, just because we're all so busy on the weekends. So keeps everyone looking forward to something every week.
You guys, I feel so old saying this, but your generation doesn't drink the same way, do you? You and I were chatting a little bit about this off air, and I was talking about my sort of 18, 19, 20 kind of years, and it was just a blur.
Yeah.
A lot of bad choices. But are you saying that's not quite as common now?
I think I've definitely, through school, you see some groups of people that go out every weekend, and I think I started to look into that group, and then I knew it wasn't for me. It was just...
Why?
I went out once and it was just kind of waking up. Well, I had work the next morning. It was just waking up feeling horrible, but still pushing through to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like, my mum was like, yeah, drinking's not for me. Like, I don't drink. This is what I do for fun. And this is how I, don't drink and other substitutes. And now I explained that to all my friends and all my friends agreed. So
got a good bunch of mates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mate, they say you can't put an old head on young shoulders, but I feel like they may have done that with you when they made you. But as far as your savings is concerned, you're smashing the goal. $1,100 a week now. It's obviously less when you were working like just in Foodland, but it sounds like even then you're probably still saving a good sort of $300 odd a week.
Yeah.
85% of it is being saved. So you're still spending a little bit of money. You're having a bit of fun, but you've still restricted it, correct? Now, what's the goal? Because in addition to being the youngest person that's ever sat in that chair, you're also the first person that's ever sat in the chair that doesn't actually own property yet. Yet is the big thing that I'm circling and putting asterisks next to, though, because I know that that's about to change very soon. If we were to sit in front of each other another 5 years, what's the goal?
In the next 12 months, I definitely want to get my foot in the door and get my first investment property signed up, and we're definitely very close to be. And then I was talking to Simon Lou the other day about what my goals were looking like, and we were very stuck on where I see myself going. And because I'm not even too sure yet, I know I want to grow in property, but about the rate, and we're also talking about what I want to get out of it. Because to have 3 properties by 25 is all very good, but why do you want 3 properties at 25? Do you want it to be able to go to Europe or take time off? I think that's one thing I still haven't got my head fully around, but I know there's so many other goals and stuff like that I could see myself planning for myself.
I like this, Lachie, because right now you're saying essentially, I'm not exactly sure on the goal. I know the goal is to build a portfolio. I know the why is because I've seen other people that have done this and they've got lives that look pretty good. You've put in the hard work with the savings. And this is actually the thing that I really want to point out, because I feel like a lot of people don't start because it's like the exact road map of everything isn't purely like worked out. And like I talked to a very good friend. He was always like, I don't know what to do. Don't know what to do. Don't know. And he never did anything because he didn't know what to do. And it was actually a Jordan Peterson video that came up like a TikTok the other day. And he was basically saying, if you don't know what to do and you feel lost, it's easy to do nothing. This is me paraphrasing. This isn't, Jordan Peterson speaks a little more eloquently. But the thing you can do is work on yourself. Yeah. You can always better yourself. And it's the big thing, mate, that I think that you're doing very well right now, that you're going, all right, I know roughly the direction I want to head in. I might not know it exactly, but I'm not going to let that stop me. And what I am going to do is prepare as much as I can, work as much as I can, build up a serviceability that's going to be usable to the banks as a fresh 18-year-old, build up a huge savings that's going to actually kickstart a portfolio, instead of what most people would do, and not just at your age, in general, a lot of people, is, well, I don't know exactly what it is. So when I figure it out, then I'll start taking steps towards it. But you've already started on the direction. And that, mate, I think that's very commendable.
Yeah, I believe like starting to build your way to the goals makes your goals a lot more achievable. Because now I'm not in the position where I go, I don't know what I want. I don't know where I see myself going, because I've put away so much money and worked a lot of my youth. I feel like it's too much work just to go nowhere. So now I'm very stuck on aiming high and then seeing what my goals are and breach my goals off then.
All right, we're about to jump into the first call with Jeremy Iannuzzelli. What's one of the top questions you've got for him, mate?
One of the main questions I've got is, what are the benefits of a trust, and when should I start looking at opening up a trust to protect myself in the future?
Love it. All right, man. Well, why don't we jump into this straight now? I think we've actually got Jeremy on the line. Jeremy Iannuzzelli. It's been a while since we've done an Unstuck episode. How you going?
Very well. I'm looking forward to today. It was so exciting to have a chat prior to this with Lachie, and just to really get to understand who he is as a young man and the effort that he's putting in. And just it reminds me so much of myself at his age, and the reason why I still continue to do what I do and love mentoring younger people, because they're willing to give it a red hot crack and willing to put in the time and the sacrifice and the energy. And I'm excited to really unpack Lachie's situation and really give him some good guidance from a tax perspective, but also just from a personal investor perspective as well, because he's in such a great position to enhance his foundation as a portfolio that he's looking to build, and then moving forward being able to really replicate something much larger than what probably you and I have, Todd. So yeah, Lachie, you've got a great future ahead of you, mate.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that I really want to focus on with Lachie, that whether you're 18 years old, like I still can't believe you're 18, you're sitting here, man, but 18 years old, 28, 38, like it's never too late to start, but the earlier you start, the bigger you can can actually build what you're intending to build. But it all starts with a solid foundation. And this is where we're talking to Jeremy to really understand how Lachie can actually build the most solid foundation from where we're starting. So first question from my end, and I know Lachie's got a few locked and loaded for you, Jez, is should he be going down the trust, like corporate trustee structure route as number one, or should he be doing this in his own personal name? Where do we begin?
Yeah, so we've seen some recent media attention about the use of trusts early on in people's portfolios to extend borrowing capacity and whether or not it's really protecting their assets or not. And I've always had a bit of a general rule of thumb, which is the first one or two properties that we buy, I'd like to see this being purchased individually. It keeps the costs low, keeps things simple from Lachie's perspective, potentially gives him a bit of negative gearing benefit in those earlier years while the interest rates are slightly higher. And I think the most important thing to note is that Lachie's still 18. His income today, his borrowing capacity constraints of today will not be the same of many years to come. And, to put it into context, Lachie at the moment is a second year or just about to head into his second year in plumbing as an apprenticeship, and he's going to get a little bit of a pay bump. By memory, he's still working 2 part-time jobs as well on the side. So at the moment, he's putting his good young back to work, which is good, earning as many dollars as he can. But this is nowhere near the peak of his income earning capacity. Lachie's got so many more years ahead of him from an income earning capacity perspective, and obviously from a property buying perspective as well. So I think it's important when you're out there, the first couple of properties you're looking to buy, do it easy, do it simple, keep the costs low, buy in your own name, obviously really preserve that amount of deposit and cash that you've got. And that's where Lachie will be able to then utilise a lot of that money for future deposits. But more importantly, because he's an apprentice, a plumber, and I'm sure he can hold a paintbrush, and Lachie will talk about that as we move forward with today. But this is where he's got a great opportunity to improve the value of the property that he buys. And that's something that I never had. As an accountant, I was, useless. As I said to Lachie, I really did think there was a left-hand hammer out there. So, you've got a great opportunity, Lachie, to really improve the value. Call upon a lot of your network and your friends and family, and this is where you've got a great opportunity to really improve value much faster than someone like me in my earlier years.
Did you really think there was a left-hand hammer, or is that a joke?
Absolutely. I said it to Lachie and his father. I said, look, I thought there was a left-hand hammer when I was 18.
Mate, okay, so I hear what you're saying. So you're basically talking around this about an extra skill set that Lachie's got to be able to force even more growth on this. But what I'm also taking from this is really keeping it into his own name is going to help him get some more benefit as far as negative gearing's concerned, which is going to help him out as far as the serviceability. And also, he's not actually probably going to get the kind of asset protection that he might think he's got from a corporate trustee structure. Have I understood you right?
Yeah, that's correct. The asset protection side of things is more so for people looking to operate in their own businesses. And while Lachie at the moment, working for somebody else as an employee across his 3 positions, he really isn't exposed to any risk that a business owner would be. So Lachie just needs to focus on working his backside off, earning the money, and obviously continuing to save more than 50% of his gross salary. And at the moment, Lachie's doing a fantastic job saving as much as he can. And I'm quite confident that he doesn't have to wait for equity to increase to be able to buy his next property. He'll be able to save for it.
So, Jeremy, some of the government grants that they offer, what are the pros and cons with, and what is eligible for a trust with the government grants?
Yeah, brilliant question. So the grants have been provided from the government to us as individuals to help us buy our own home to live in. The government's not about helping, people make millions of dollars from buying investment property. So the stamp duty concessions, the 5% deposit scheme, that's all there to help people get into their own home, their principal place of residence. And, you can use those grants wisely if you're buying in your own name, although they're not really eligible for any corporate structure because that's deemed as an investment. You can't necessarily make property or an asset within inside a corporate structure your principal place of residence and exempt yourself for tax purposes in most cases. So really trying to focus on yourself, where if you are buying in your own name, you do have that opportunity where you can access potentially government grants like the 5% deposit scheme coming in October, like some stamp duty concessions on some certain assets in certain states. And that gives you an opportunity, again, to be able to retain capital, depending where you're buying, of course, Lachie. And I'm a big fan, being 18, it would be fantastic to see you buy in a property that's probably quite local to you or in a demographic or an area where you can afford and improve the value. And that's where you can see, touch and feel the fruits of your labour. I often find there's a big disconnection between investors who are buying their first property in the state. It kind of doesn't feel like that, while they know they have an asset asset there and paying a liability. It just doesn't feel like something they can improve the value on. And for me, one of the biggest things that I look back in my property investment journey is to buy my first investment property within 10, 15 minutes of where I lived made a world of difference because I drove past it. I was impressed. I was proud. I was excited. I added value. I gardened. I hedged. I painted. And these are the little things that I tried to do alongside my left-hand hammer to improve the value of the property. And I think that's where you've got a great opportunity, as I said, to access some of those grants if they're available to you. On the basis it doesn't impact too much of your borrowing capacity, and on the basis you can actually afford to abide by the grant rules and live in that particular property for a certain period of time where you're not showing it as an investment. It is your genuine principal place of residence. But again, that's for something for the broker to unpack, what that looks like from a borrowing capacity perspective. But if it's available to you and you can afford it and you've done your budget, your numbers, and it does work out to save you some money accessing the grants available to you, Lachie, it's a no-brainer.
Yep, yeah, 100%. You said before that your first and second property you want to do individually. What's the main reason you do want to get a trust or start looking at trust on your third and fourth property?
Yeah,
good question, mate.
It's a challenging question because a lot of people have different views. Professionals to professionals will argue this and debate this, and I always tend to look at the statistics and the reason why I come up with that particular philosophy, and it's very simple. A very small amount of investors get to 3 or more properties, and I've always been a big believer, Lachie, that you need to show me before you tell me, and showing me before you tell me is you going out there and taking a commitment and a consistent approach of buying your first couple properties, because the last thing as a professional we want is to see a person who's got the best infrastructure, they've built the best bridge, but nobody's got a car to drive across it. Similar to what's happening in China, a lot of ghost cities being built. China have built thousands of buildings, or builders have built thousands of buildings, but no one's in there to live in them. And then all of a sudden what you've got is failing infrastructure. So I like to see the first couple being purchased individually, keeps the cost low, keeps things simple, and then it starts to show me that you are an investor who wants to be consistent. This is a journey that you're willing to take, and now you can start to load yourself up with the right structure to help you grow from a borrowing, but also from asset protection perspective, more importantly, a tax minimisation perspective as well. So it's the old notion, Lachie, show me before you tell me. You want to buy a property, show me you can save the money first for the deposit, then show me you've got the commitment to make sure that you can abide by the loan repayments. There's no point trying to or wanting to buy a property if you don't save and you're not thrifty or frugal with your money.
Yeah, I think Lachie's definitely frugal with his money. He's got that down pat. He's nailing it. But a question that I wanted to ask, that I feel like it sounds off topic at first, or it's going to, but it's very much on topic. Being a young lad, if he ends up getting a partner, they stay together for a little while, is there any kind of protection that if we fast forward the clock and Lachie just keeps executing on this plan and has 3 or 4 properties, if something was to not work out, how can he protect himself? Because arguably the person that you choose to really spend your time with is the biggest financial decision you can make. Is there anything he can do now?
Yeah, look, the first comment any accountant will make is make sure you choose someone who is as good as your mum, Lachie. Yeah. So someone's going to look after you, obviously, and be that that partner in crime with you to really have the same level of goals and attributes and the direction you're taking. But aside from that, you've got concepts, you've got mechanisms such as a binding financial agreement. Now, again, solicitors will go into detail about the pros and cons of it, but essentially it helps to kind of protect what you've brought in. However, the binding financial agreement can very much come off the cards, once you start to be financially dependent on one another, your spouse has financially aided you or you've aided each other to build a successful, asset base. You've got children. The family law courts kind of beat to a tune of their own drum, as I say, and it's very hard to protect the assets that you've built together. And longer, obviously, you're in a relationship and when kids are involved, it does become very tough to be able to walk out with a certain level of asset base that you may have walked in with. So I always tell people that, talk to a solicitor. Binding financial agreement is a good start, but here in Australia, our prenuptial agreements are not as strong or as strict as the United States. And even that's very loose as a prenuptial agreement now with the recent proceedings that are going on all around the world with, divorces and separations. It's very much who's the magistrate on the day and what they decide.
As far as a solid piece of protection, there really is nothing apart from choose a lady as good as your mum.
Absolutely. And you've got you can do, and I'll touch upon it because I think it's one of those important things to touch upon. There are cases where there might be a trust that gets established, and mum and dad are the appointers, mum and dad are directors of the trustee. For all intensive purposes, they control the trust because remember, nobody owns a trust; we control it. If the children are providing capital to the fund prior to any obviously marriage or arrangement, and that's being used by the trust to be able to then buy and facilitate other asset purchases, that's under the control of mum and dad. Now, the challenge becomes, Lachie, that you won't be able to use that equity for yourself if those properties grow because it's really under the control of mum and dad and not essentially yourself. So there are pros and cons going down the ultimate path of asset protection from future spouses. But life is one of those things where it is a journey. Sometimes it doesn't take the path we always want it to take, but it's what we do thereafter, which then dictates and determines our success.
So one of the major things with the trust, how hard is it? For example, I build 1 or 2 properties independently, and then on 3rd and 4th, mum and I start a family trust. With a trust, how hard is it to start changing if it's a family trust? Who owns how much and who controls how much percentage of the trust?
Great question.
Yeah, so there's 2 types of trust, Lachie, out there. There's what they call a discretionary trust, which means nobody owns it, you control it, so there's no defined level of percentage of ownership. The distribution is dictated by the trustee, which whoever was the directors of the corporate trustee, that is. Then you've got the other type of trust, which is called a fixed trust, or otherwise known as a unit trust. And that does have a defined level of ownership, which means that you bring in people and it's defined by the amount of units that are owned in that particular entity. And that means when profit is made, or that profit is then distributed to the unit holders at their percentage. So you don't necessarily change a discretionary trust. There are taxing implications if you do change appointers, which is the ultimate controllers. If you do add beneficiaries that are external to the terms of the deed, there could be some CGT implications as well. So we generally don't change trusts. Once we've established them, we try not to change them. But discretionary trusts, there's no defined level of ownership. And that's where the challenge comes in when you're bringing in, say, mum, dad, and 2 kids, and they start to argue that I own 25%. Well, not necessarily do they own 25%. In fact, not necessarily they own anything. They may control it, but the trust is the one that owns it, and the trustee will then dictate and determine where that distribution goes in line with the beneficiaries of the deed.
Got it. Okay. Was that the answer you're expecting?
Yeah, that's more than I was expecting, yeah.
I think one thing to note, Lachie, as well, a lot of questions I get asked is, well, Jeremy, can I move my properties into a trust later on? I bought my first 2 properties. I've owned them for 3 years. I've shown you now, Jeremy, that I'm really ready to rock and roll. I want to start building a large portfolio. Let's get the trust going. Let's buy as many assets as we can. But can I also move my existing assets into my trust? And the answer is yes, you can do it, but it comes at a substantial cost. And that cost is stamp duty to the purchaser, which would be the trust that's receiving the property. And the other cost is capital gain tax to the seller, which is selling the property to the trust. Buying those first couple of properties, not necessarily will you keep them for the rest of your life. They may be a really good springboard or a foundation for you to build a much healthier portfolio. And, I've sold many properties in my portfolio over the time. They just didn't meet my investment strategy at the stage, but they were good at that time. So these first 2 properties you may be buying, they may not be around forever. They may be there to set the foundation of what could be a much larger and better property portfolio in the future. And that's where incorporating your future purchases into a trust, after you've learned the skills, you've got the hang of it, you're comfortable with debt, and that's where you can really start to tailor your strategy to be a little bit more aggressive, but also a little bit more sophisticated. You're going to add, some really good X factor type of properties in there, where it could be subdivision, granny flats, it could be major renovations, minor renovations. You could be buying property at, very much below market value, which is what, as investors, we all aim to achieve.
Jeremy, I had a couple of last questions, mate. One is actually a slightly personal one. For you, if you were in Lachie's situation now, rewinding the clock 18, because obviously you've built a wonderful portfolio, mate. I don't even know what it is now, 25 million. It's huge. What do you still wish you were told at this age, or you'd actioned at this age, that would have actually got you further along?
Houses are without a doubt my bread and butter in the property portfolio. My issue was I was going for a number of properties, Lachie, as opposed to the type of value of properties. I probably would suggest you should be looking at the quality as opposed to quantity. Don't just focus on getting to 10. Focus on having really good quality properties that add value, properties that have good rental returns, got a strong demand from a tenant perspective, and have some future for growth and a path to being positive. So that's one thing I'd be recommending to myself as an 18-year-old, and I recommend that to you, Lachie, as well. But more importantly, Lachie, what you've got that I didn't, and as I said before, and third time I've referenced it now, a left-hand hammer, you've got access to some really good quality network of trades around you. All tradies know other tradies. Parents might be in the trade position as well. That can be handy with a paintbrush or a reciprocator saw or a circular saw or even a hammer, that is. But for me, if I bought more properties in Sydney at the time the Sydney market was growing and there was a lot of renovator properties around me, I probably would have been in a better position earlier on, as opposed to going interstate buying cheaper properties like townhouses and units, because I was focused on a number as opposed to quality. From one investor to another, I know that the illusion of buying interstate, cheaper areas, cheaper properties, growth spots, data sets, all the buzzwords that come into play these days is important, no doubt about it. Being a nomadic investor is key to success. But for you personally, as an investor, from me to you, buying somewhere close to you is probably going to be very important. Again, to see, touch and feel it, but more importantly, you should be spending every weekend there, fixing gutters, painting fences, replacing lino, could be, putting brand new weatherboards on the property if it's a weatherboard home. Even gurney in a driveway makes a massive difference to the appeal and value of a property. So for me, as one investor to another, I think buying somewhere quite locally in a place you can afford is brilliant. Adding as much value as you can, spending every waking hour of your time there, even with tenants there, and propping that property's value up to either increase equity or B, increase rental return, which will have a cataclysmic effect on your growth as a property investor and also your ability to borrow as well.
What other questions did you have, man? I know that we don't have too much longer with Jeremy, but
that was kind of one of the main things. And one of the other things was, what was some of the things you struggled with when you first tried to start into building your housing portfolio?
Deposit was always and always will be the hardest. Those first 1, 2, or even 3 properties, Lachie, they're the hardest. It feels excruciating. And there's a reason why that statistic's out there that a very small percentage of property investors get to 3 or more. It's the consistency. I look around at all the successful clients that I've got, whether they're a plumber, a farmer, an accountant, they've done the same thing for 20, 30 years. They've been property investors for 20, 30 years, and they've built up extraordinary amounts of wealth. I always share this, story about a client of mine. He was a tradie, by memory a mechanic. For 30 years, he's been in the same trade, built up a $15 million plus portfolio and never earned 6 figures in his life. But the key to success is same profession, got really good at it, loved property investing, stayed consistent at it. When he could buy, he bought, and he held for as long as he possibly could, but he also added lots of value to his properties. He went and fixed the blinds, he went and fixed the gutters, painted the roofs, gurneyed the driveways, he went and bought the kitchens from Bunnings and put them in. So he's always done things according to his means because he didn't have a huge amount of salary. So the first 3 properties are going to be your toughest. Getting that deposit, the consistency of saving, the consistency of buying properties, Lachie. If you can continue to have the same level of passion, also the same level of hunger that you have today, say 3 years from now, once you get over those first 3, 4, 5 and 6 come a lot easier.
Wrapping it up, Jez. So basically what I'm hearing is Lachie should really be considering his own name, not a structure. He should be adding as much value as possible, capitalizing on the fact that he owns an ambidextrous hammer, let's say. He should be buying local to where he is, as much as investing borderless is great and absolutely going to be a tool that he's going to need to bring out of his toolbox eventually. Maybe not so much for the first one. And also he should be looking into potentially if a grant is applicable, because also if he gets it in his own name, then that might be an option. But because he's going to be renovating something, obviously none of the builder grants or anything like that would apply. Plus, he would also have to then move into it, which brings me to my next question, because that's going to be a question that we'll ask Morgan as far as serviceability is concerned, how much it's going to affect it, having it as a PPR versus actually renting the property out. But I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, what questions should we be having locked and loaded for Morgan up next, and then Simon?
Morgan really needs to give you that path, that lending strategy, Lachie, where it's not just these are the milestones you need to be hitting to continue your buying journey. So, once you get to $100,000 income, this is the level of borrowing that opens up. Once you get to 120 income, this is the level of borrowing that opens up. So you kind of want to see, what keys are needed for every door of your journey so you can work towards it. I think that's one of the biggest things that we miss. It's that strategy. It's having the keys to the doors and having a little bit of foresight to say, well, these are the hurdles I need to overcome. Next, yes, you're correct, Todd and Lachie, you need to be really reviewing between the PPOR versus the investment. As an investment, you get to bring in the rental income as part of the borrowing capacity, so that may improve or increase the level of borrowing that you've got. I'm a big fan of capital preservation, Lachie, as well. So it's really understanding potentially mum and dad going as guarantors if you have the access to it. Not that you need it, because you have saved up a very healthy balance to act as a deposit for a property. However, if mum and dad can go as guarantors, you can borrow the balance, obviously, of the money of guarantorship as well as the balance of the property, and it doesn't hurt the ability to buy the type of property you want. All of a sudden, you've got plenty of capital that you can use towards potentially renovating the property, or to sit in the offset account as a buffer for not just one rainy day, but probably for a year of rainy days, because capital preservation is key, and that will help springboard you into the next property as well. Trust, explore what a trust will look like. Obviously, some borrowing benefits attached to it, but again, it must be on the caveat that the trust itself is able to be self-sufficient, which in most cases, even under a 20% deposit at today's interest rates, it's probably not going to be there. And you need to factor in, obviously, different policies from banks, which can help you improve that position a lot quicker. But understand the type of properties as well that you'll be looking at buying, because what one needs to understand is the yield does have some impact on the borrowing capacity. If you're buying a property that's, say, in a state in Victoria with a 3 or 2.5% gross yield, Lachie, that rental income, yes, while it adds to your borrowing capacity, that yield doesn't necessarily improve your position. Where buying a property with a 5 or 6% gross yield, or buying a property with a low yield and making the yield 5 to 6% through some cosmetic renovations, or maybe buying under market value when you purchase the property, they're the little things that you can get a very big pay bump and help a good little amount of borrowing capacity form part of your portfolio again. From Simon's perspective, I'm a big fan, given your age, you need to see, touch and feel what you're buying. I think you've got time. As I said, you've got a very healthy back. So I think if you can look at something surrounding where you live, or within 45 minutes or an hour drive, something that is affordable, something that you can add value to, I think that's where you're going to be able to really propel yourself in your first and second property. Then after that, Lachie, your world's your oyster. You can become a very nomadic investor, invest all over the country, and making sure that you're looking at not just the type of property you're buying, but where it sits in the market at any relevant time.
Beautiful. Any final questions, mate, just as a quickie?
No, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jez. Really appreciate your time, mate. And we'll be chatting with Morgan next, but I'll talk to you again soon.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mate, that was a lot. What's your biggest takeaway from Jeremy?
It was really good to talk with him. One of the major things I took away from that was about the trusts and how they work, and when's a good time to use them, and what are the real benefits of them.
Because I feel like, especially if you just start listening to a few podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever, you hear the term like trusts thrown around so much. Naturally, you're looking at it going, well, is this the thing that I should be doing? But by the sounds of Jeremy's opinion, and he did very much say that this is an opinion thing, there's pros and cons to both ways, but the way that he's looking at it, there's actually a lot more pros in the camp of you putting it in your name first.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of talk about trusts and stuff like that, and it was really good to get a clear understanding on what it would look like in my situation.
Beautiful. Was there any other kind of mind equals blown moments or like big ahas for you?
Another thing I was really good to talk with Jeremy about was the government grants, which is another thing I can't wait to ask Morgan and see what his opinions are.
That is going to be an interesting one, because like 5% deposit scheme, there's a few other builder grants. Like there's a lot of like free money for anyone that's on iTunes or Spotify. I'm air quoting that, but it's tempting, but is it the best option? And I think this is going to be really interesting to see with Morgan, because even when you and I very first chatted, that was one of the first things that I was saying, that I'm not always a fan of, especially new builds. Yeah. However, you've got to know what your options are if you actually want to make the best choice.
Yep, yeah, because there's heaps out at new builds, but I've heard some good and bad things, so it'd be good to clear up with him and figure out what the best option looking forward is.
Awesome, man. Well, why don't we jump straight into this call with Morgan and figure out a little bit more about that path moving forward for you, so you can not only get into rental property number one, but set yourself up that it's going to put you in the best position to then springboard that to number two. Ready to chat with Morgs?
Yep, sounds good.
Morgan Bushell, how you going, man?
Good, thanks, Toddy. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. You've already had a bit of a chat with Lachie, but I think this is the first time you guys have actually met. Well, I was about to say face-to-face, but I guess digitally face-to-face.
That's it.
Yeah. Now, there's a few things that we want to go through, which Jeremy's given us a few questions to touch on as far as target rental yields and a couple other bits and pieces. I'm really curious to actually unpack a bit of Lachie's situation as far as going down a potential PPR path and actually taking advantage of some of the government grants that are on offer, or about to be on offer as well, a few more, versus what is the extra serviceability when it comes to actually having the rental income coming in and treating it as an investment property. I know Lachie's got a ton of questions as well, but mate, did you want to actually start steering the ship based on the chat you've previously had with Lachie so we can get a bit more of a feel for, well, I guess, where he's sitting and borrowing power?
Yeah, sure. So when we got all the information from Lachie, we're kind of considering, I guess, all potential options that he may have had, even some that he didn't even mention were an option. So we kind of looked at really making the most of preserving his savings, because as a first-time buyer, that's really important. So keeping that as much on hand as possible. So considering, like you said, first home buying scheme, doing, say, a 5% deposit with lender's mortgage insurance. And the third one, which didn't really come up in our initial chat, but I kind of uncovered it could be an option, is guarantor lending. So they were kind of the three things that we kind of considered before today's recording.
Okay, and naturally, this is one of the reasons why you guys were feeling, or yourself, you were feeling a little bit more confused, because there's so many options. It's like, which one do we actually pull the trigger on that's going to be the best to keep moving me forward? And what did you guys end up working out when you were running scenarios, Morgan?
Yeah, so when we're running scenarios, like first of all, kind of tackling it from the first home guarantee scheme with, I guess, the way the banks assess that. So there's no rental income, obviously, with this. And we're kind of really relying on the notice of assessment for income verification. So chances are, if like Lachie was actually earning less than compared to now, it actually works more against him from a borrowing power perspective. However, just using Lachie's pay slips and kind of looking at things through the lens of this scheme, we could only really get to about a $350K purchase price as far as a home goes.
Okay, so $350,000 if he was to go down the route of actually living in the property and using the 5% first homeowners scheme.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Now, contrasting that with if he was to actually go down the investment property route, how much did it change things? Are we talking an extra 50 grand or what?
No, it's actually much more. And between the two investing options we looked at, the one that actually helped him get the most was where we'd kind of end up at about a $550K purchase price. So $200,000 difference.
Jesus. Okay. So really worth going down the investment property route.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned something about guarantors, and this is something that Jeremy was talking about as well, because you were talking about preservation of savings. He was really talking about like preserving capital. Before we open up that, Lachie, did you have a few questions on that, mate? Because a $200K difference, I'm assuming that's probably made your decision for you right there, whether you should go down the grants or not.
100%. Yeah, guarantee was definitely the only option I've found now. I was just asking, what are some of the pros and cons, and why is there such a big difference?
The main difference is we're not kind of including rental income, but also, I mean, the bank's eyes debt is debt, but investment debt actually slightly increases borrowing power more because they let us kind of include the negative gearing benefit you would get on that loan. On top of that too, I mean, what's great about your situation is you're also living at home rent free. So those three things together actually give you that $200,000 more in borrowing power compared to using the scheme itself.
Right, so basically the big thing that makes the difference is the $400, $500, $600 a week, whatever it is that's being used, that's essentially being counted as income, but plus then there's the negative gearing benefit as well. The banks go, okay, well, you're going to get a bit of tax back too, so this is all helping drastically with the servicing. I know you said a little bit before, 200 grand, that's more than a little bit, man. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the difference between getting something that's actually quite meaningful versus maybe something out in the sticks. So yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah, 100%.
When do you believe is the best time to stop paying interest only on a mortgage?
So the best time to not have interest only is probably when you've stopped acquiring property. So you've kind of finalized your acquisition phase. And when does that end really depends on the person as the investor. So for some clients of ours, for example, they might spend 5 years going really hard and then stop. Whereas I've got some clients who just want to keep acquiring property over a few decades before they then get the portfolio to principal and interest repayments.
And for anyone that's a little bit newer at property investing, mate, and also for Lachie himself, what's the benefit to going interest only as far as actually being able to grow further?
There's two kind of main benefits in my opinion. So the first is actually as an investor, like it actually really helps us with managing our cash flow. Like when I presented Lachie the $550 purchase price, it was like $600 difference per month between interest only versus principal and interest, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're acquiring a few properties under your belt, that actually really builds up. So cash flow is kind of king, as they say. And then depending on how aggressive some people go with building the portfolio, if you end up using some third tier banks, having all your existing lending before you go to them on interest only just helps your borrowing power actually go a little bit further with them.
Now, I know I was just saying to open this up for anyone that's a little bit fresher, but could you open that up for anyone that's maybe at 2 or 3? Because I know that a lot of people think, oh, great, if it's interest only, then my borrowing power, my serviceability instantly goes up. But that's still lender dependent. That's what you're saying?
It does. And I mean, to kind of put a bit of a rule of thumb on this, it's kind of like first, second tier banks, principal and interest repayments actually give you slightly higher borrowing power. But if you kind of get to that point in your journey where you are using, say, third tier banks, bank dependent, if you get towards kind of the lower end of third tier banks, principal and interest actually works against you from a borrowing power perspective.
Well, yeah, thank you for that one. Another one that tees off that is, when do you believe the best time is to set up an offset account?
Yeah, I mean, typically if the kind of bank and the product we use has one that's involved and it doesn't really cost any more to get one, you might as well have it, just because if the goal is cash flow and say we're using a second or even third tier bank, you really want to kind of make the most of minimizing the interest costs on the higher paying debt. So for example of that, you definitely use it for a second or third tier bank just to really improve your cash flow with the types of lending at those levels.
And what is the target rental yield that Lachie needs to hit to make sure he doesn't get himself stuck from purchase number 1?
Yeah, so we've kind of stuck with about a 4.5% rental yield. I mean, we can go a little bit lower than that if we actually need to, but anything beyond that, it's just upside for him.
Okay, so 4.5%. As far as actually modeling out the rental purchase number 2, does he have, once he's got this first one, so he's got a borrowing power of 550 as a maximum, but that's with a guarantor, with mum stepping in and basically saying, I'll give you a bit of a hand, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Got it. If mum wasn't to step in and help out with the borrowing power side, what would he actually be looking at if he was to try and do this like completely solo? For anyone that's listening right now and they're thinking, I don't have guarantor from the bank of mum or dad.
Yeah, so if that was not an option, then we would need to use what would be called a second tier lender, and we'd need to use something like a 95% loan to value ratio with lender's mortgage insurance involved. So yeah, by him being able to use this guarantor option, we completely avoid the lender's mortgage insurance for him too.
Okay, so there still is an option, but I'm assuming that just comes with more of a heavier interest rate, because they're not doing it because they're lovely people. They're doing it because they're making a quid out of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's around 40 basis points higher than what we'd get with using a major bank. And yeah, like I mentioned, there is lender's mortgage insurance involved. So there's a bit of cost of doing business, but could still enter the market instead of having to wait longer to save up a bigger deposit.
And again, for anyone that's a little bit newer, 40 basis points, about 0.5% of interest is what Morgan's talking about. So there's definitely higher repayments attached to it, but that's not sheep stations high. I genuinely thought you were about to say an extra % or more.
Well, it's okay, because the bank we're using for this, if we did do it, like the interest rates aren't bad. Like at the time of recording this, it's 6.34. So it's not completely rubbish, but it's still higher than what we could have got with the guarantor option.
So as far as him not getting stuck, then he needs a rental yield of 4.5%. If he can go down the guarantor path, he can unlock an interest rate that's a little bit better as far as like on the hip pocket. He needs to go interest only to save about $600 a month for his cash flow, which is then going to preserve your savings as well. And then he's not looking at using all of the government grants and doing a PPR. He's looking at doing this as an investment property. What else does he really need to bear in mind to maximize his chances of setting himself up to getting into rental number 2 as soon as possible?
So I think one thing that we kind of discussed when we went through the numbers was we're looking, well, I guess Lachie's looking at using some of that remaining savings, because if we go down the guarantor path, he'll actually have some money left over from what he's been working so hard to save. So yeah, I guess the goal is to do a bit of a renovation on it and then get the property revalued to then either release the guarantor or possibly even actually have more equity to play with to then repatriate to get number 2 afterwards.
Okay, so if Lachie does a reno and adds more like 50K sort of value, you're not talking about adding hundreds of thousands or anything huge, are you?
No, not really. And I mean, depending on what he buys, like that may just be enough, for example, for him to refinance mum. So then the property is completely his. Anything more than what is needed to refinance mum is just spare equity that can go towards buying the next property afterwards.
Okay, and what would everything look like? Because I know that Lachie's got it in front of him here, but I know you're really good at this, Morgan. You put together like the plan, so it's not just about a property, it's about the portfolio. What else? Does his income need up? Does he? Because I don't think he can work physically more than he already does. I think he's like at his job more than anything else. How does he make sure he's going to be able to unlock number 2 apart from the equity side with mum and the guarantor aspect of it?
Yeah. So when I was looking at Lachie's situation, and there's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, geez, like 18 years old, you have the whole world ahead of you. But if I had to kind of analyze what you had less of, it probably would have been borrowing power. So I would always say, like, keep focusing on increasing your income. Like, I shared a whole bunch of tips for him on what he could do to increase that even more. But also at the same time, like, let the market do the lifting beyond the renovation that you're going to do. Yeah, so it's kind of a combination of both. And being so young, like, if you just got time in the market, that will really help you move things forward, especially when you're also doing a renovation too.
Perfect. Thank you for that. That's definitely answered all my questions. But another one is, what was one thing you wish you started earlier and then committed to at a younger age?
So when I was young, like, I was doing actually a lot of things that you were doing. Like, I was working casually, I was working like part-time at a bank. On weekends, I'd work at music festivals just to earn some spare income. So keep doing that. Like, that's going to not only help improve your borrowing power, it'll just give you more cash that you can either put towards that next reno project. The thing that probably I would really focus on the most in your situation is actually just self-education. Like, you'll learn a lot by going through this process in the first property transaction. But I think with investing, it's always kind of a journey of learning more and more. So read all the books, obviously listen to the podcasts, try and meet more like-minded investors too. Like, I used to, for example, like, reach out to people on forums and ask for like 5 minutes of their time. So I would do the same thing if I were you.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you for that.
Did you say you used to work at music festivals on the weekends? How many music festivals were there where you grew up?
Well, I was part of a group that kind of did like Central Coast, everything in Sydney. I went down to Canberra, but I did like all the big music festivals. Like, I worked behind the bar. So
cool.
Most of the time I was working at them. Yeah.
Didn't know that about you. There you go.
It was actually a really fun job.
that would have been, yeah. One of the other things, because the renovation side of things, it's actually how Morgan and I very first met. I don't know how long we've known each other for now, 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Renovated like a burnt out house. I'll show you photos of it later. It's really cool. And just in case you're listening, iTunes or Spotify, rewind back. That was probably episode like 30 or 40. It was very early days. Document the whole journey of Morgan's reno with that, because you added some awesome value to the property, and that was one of the early day properties that really springboarded your portfolio as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, it definitely helped a lot. And I guess another tip for you too, Lachie, is like what Todd just said, document your journey. Like, you'll be able to look back on it and just think, man, like, I did that stuff. Like, yes, I worked maybe 16-hour days just renovating over the weekends whilst working my face off at work. But you'll really appreciate it, especially like when you go through a property cycle or two and that property's probably doubled or tripled in value.
Yeah.
So last question from me, Morgan, is what are the questions you want us to ask Simon to make sure that Lachie is hitting the right yield, he's got something that's adding value? Like, what should we be prepping him with?
I think the main thing is kind of working with what we've kind of discussed as like an ideal purchase price. I think depending on which market, Simon places him in, I'd want to know, like, what kind of yield are we looking for? Income's a big factor for Lachie. So rental income kind of matters in this situation. And then I think another thing too, I'm not sure if it's part of Simon's world, but also roughly what maybe might be needed to do the cosmetic renovation. Like, that would probably be something just for Lachie that he would need to kind of know, because then we can kind of reverse engineer what we have to do on the lending side too.
Awesome, man. All right. So it sounds like we really want to know a little bit more about the where side. Jeremy was very big on get it close just because it's your first one. So you can sort of touch it, feel it, smell it, add the value to it. However, if there's nothing close that actually ticks the yield box and you're going to get stuck, and this is by the sounds of things what we really need to talk to Simon about to find out where is that right yield potentially positioned at the time of recording, so you can actually purchase something that's going to keep you moving forward. Otherwise, this isn't an unstuck episode. This is a getting you stuck episode. We don't want that. But Morgan, are there any final words of wisdom or anything else you want to leave us with today, mate?
No, I think Lachie's doing all the right things. Like, keep working hard, but keep asking questions. Always be hungry to learn more. And my biggest tip is just try to meet more like-minded people like yourself. That's something that personally helped me quite a lot in my journey. So just always be hungry to learn more.
Beautiful. Morgan Bushell from Full Circle Finance. Thank you so much for jumping on the show, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
$200,000 difference. Were you expecting that?
Yeah, it was definitely a much bigger difference than I was expecting compared to living in it, compared to trying to rent it out.
And I think it's where so many of us get like well-intentioned advice from like mum, dad, friends, whoever, that are like, okay, get your first place, get yourself sorted. And this always used to be something I'd see all the time. Like, I'd have other mates that were tradies that were like, how do you do it, Todd? And then I'd talk to them about their place, and they've got this beautiful PPR. And they're like, oh, the bank says I can't get anything else. It's like, yeah, because you've got this incredible home. Like, you've maxed everything out.
Yeah.
And looking at this, if you had have gone down the route before we're even talking about maxing out with like some amazing sort of like like primary place of residence, just even buying that place to live in to begin with, no one would bat an eyelid. You'd be an 18-year-old with their own like home, even if it's a 1-bedroom unit. Everyone would still be patting you on the back going, that's amazing. And it is amazing. But now, again, this is coming back to understanding your options. And this is exactly what Lachie's doing now. And knowing that there's now potentially a $200,000 difference between this being a PPR or an investment property. Compound that $200,000 over the next 10, 20 years. If you look at the Australian real estate market historically, doubles on average every kind of 7 to 10 years. So that 200K is going to turn into 400, which in 20 years is going to turn to 800. It's night and day.
Yeah.
And it's the simplest little change at the very beginning, which I've got a feeling you're probably going to enjoy more anyway, being able to get in, get out, renovate something quickly, add some value, and hopefully move on to the next super quick.
That's definitely my plan, is to find something, get in there, fix what needs to be fixed, and then move it on.
Because from what Jeremy's saying, I mean, that's the superpower that you've got that you would just see as normal because of the way you work and because of the industry you're in, that like he said, if he had with his left-handed hammer or whatever, like he's pretty far along, but could potentially be even further, or could have got to where he is quicker if you start putting that skill set to work for you. But before we move on to chatting with Simon in just a second, what are the other like sort of big takeaways that you got from chatting with Morgan just now?
One of the big things was, when is the best time to use principal, and then when is it good to use principal and interest, and what point in your property career do you start to look at changing them over? So
when you say use principal, are you talking about using as in capital, or you mean like interest only versus principal and interest?
Interest only and capital.
Gotcha. And what did you learn from that? What do you reckon you'd be doing?
Yeah, that's definitely the path I want to go down, of paying interest only on all my properties until I get to the end, and then start looking at paying them off.
The other thing to remember as well, and not just for yourself, everyone listening to this, is you can still make extra payments on interest only. So don't think, like if you've got a fixed interest rate that can change, there's a few maybes or asterisks next to it. But if you do end up going, actually, for some reason, I want to pay it down, you can. Or like we discussed with Morgan about offsets, you can just put the money into an offset account. So then it's kind of like paying it down without paying it down. So you've still got access to those funds. And again, there's pros and cons as far as then reducing the tax deductible debt. If you've got a PPR, obviously it's better to reduce. But like we've just discussed, if you were to get a PPR right now, that's going to potentially hold you back more than it's going to push you forwards.
Yeah, because then you end up just getting stuck, and then you're in a worse position than what you started off in.
Exactly, man. All right, so where we're at the moment, we know that you've got a target rental yield of 4.5%, and that's a gross rental yield. We know that interest only is the way to move forward as far as helping your cash flow on a month-to-month, week-to-week basis. We know that an investment property is definitely the way to go. Talking with Jeremy, we also know that putting it in your name versus a corporate trustee structure also has a lot more benefits to it for your situation moving you forward. And the last thing that Morgan was really pointing out was educate yourself, like it's just what you're doing. Like I'm genuinely looking forward to sitting down with you in 5 years time when you're 23 years old. I think we're going to have really cool conversations, man. But now moving on to Simon, is there anything that you're really wanting to get from that chat with Simon before we start?
What does a growing area look like, and how do you get those indications that you believe an area is set to grow? And what are signs of an area you don't want to go near? And how can you tell what area is going to grow and go down before they do it and before everyone gets in there?
Mate, you got all the $64 million questions. I love it. Let's jump straight into this chat with Simon Liu and get a few answers to those questions for you.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Simon Liu, how you going, man?
Pod Sloan, how are you?
Very good. Here with Lachie, who has got a ton of questions for you, mate.
Hi, Simon. How are you?
I'm good, Lachie. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Mate, we're looking forward to this. Like I said, Lachie's got a few questions, but before we jump into this, and also we've got a few that have come from Morgan and Jeremy as well. Is there anything that you really wanted to set the stage with? Because this isn't the norm. Someone that's literally just turned 18 and got 80 odd grand in their back pocket to invest. What did you want to start this off with, Simon?
Look, congratulations, man. I think that's the best place to start. Like, as an 18-year-old with a head as switched on as yours, I think it's such a rarity, you know, especially nowadays. Well, I don't even know what's nowadays. I'm pretty old now, but when I was 18, you know, the last thing I was thinking of was trying to get ahead, was trying to get a job. You know, I was just thinking about hanging out with mates and doing stupid stuff with my time. And, you know, the fact that you're working 3 jobs is unbelievable in itself. So much dedication to getting ahead and obviously thinking about putting that money into property already. So well done there, man. Like genuinely, even with all the people that I interact with, very rarely see people get ahead at this age. And coming off that, I think the number one thing I would say to you is don't especially at this age, is there's no need to rush, right? Like you've got an entire lifetime's worth of career and jobs and business and, investing in property. There's going to be different markets. There's going to be peaks and troughs. There's going to be good times, bad times. Like, you're basically just starting out, right? So the most important thing I can probably say to you now is just don't get FOMO, because that's probably the main narrative I'm seeing now in the marketplace, especially since all these first home buyers grants and 5% deposits and all this kind of stuff have come into play, which, at the time of recording is going to be coming into effect in 2 days' time. In my time of investing, I've seen all these different first home buyers grants come and go. I've seen high interest rates, low interest rates, good economies, bad economies, all these different markets booming and busting in some cases, COVID, like there's always going to be something else. And it happens almost every year. And all these people making decisions based on it. One of the most, look, some people get lucky, they do very well, but one of the more common themes is they make mistakes. They make mistakes, they get thrown into the deep end, or maybe they get sold to, they get pulled in a direction by a property spruiker or maybe like a, marketer into something that, can take potentially several years to heal or to fix itself. But most importantly, at such a young age and starting out, you're full of excitement, full of energy, full of motivation. Like that, going through like a really bad investment could affect that significantly.
And this is why you're saying to not rush things, because you might make a choice now which feels like progress but can actually be steps back in a few years.
Yeah, correct. I think for a lot of young people, having a property is more important than why do you want to invest in property. I think the notion of owning a property, any property, is so exciting and something that you're so proud about as well. Brag to your friends and family about, I'm 18 years old, I have a property. That kind of mindset can sometimes override the fact or whether or not that particular property will make money, right? Which is obviously the ultimate goal. So don't get too caught up in that. It comes back to being unemotional and just stick to the numbers, stick to a strategy, find a real reason why you want to invest and buy a property now and next year and, multiple properties down the track, and work towards that consistently, is what I'd like to start with.
Okay. So what I'm really taking away from that is basically don't jump off this call and just buy the first thing because, yay, I can buy something. I've been approved now. I can move forward with like a $550 spend. You're saying like, it's great what you're doing. You've saved yourself a lot of money. Now be smart about the next decision. Don't just go, you can't go wrong with houses. That kind of attitude is not going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. In general, just keep your head level.
Okay. Yeah. I did want to set the situation for you, and then we'll jump into a few of Lachie's questions. So what we've basically got is from Jeremy starting things off. He said to buy in his own name, not a corporate trustee structure, anything along those lines. He's basically saying if you can add value, then this is something that's worth considering, especially because Lachie doesn't have 2 left hands. He's pretty skilled on the tools. I know that's something that you're not always for as well. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. And he's basically also looking at it going, you're probably not going to take advantage of all of the first homeowners grants, which was very much backed up by Morgan. Morgan said if you stay interest only in your own name, you need to hit a target yield minimum of 4.5%. And then if you can add a bit of value, amazing. And you've got a buy price of $350 if it was a PPR, or all the way up to $550 if you can wrangle mum to jump in and do a bit of a guarantor loan. So is there any other sort of general info that you need, Simon, to keep going with this, mate?
No, I think what Jeremy and Morgan has advised is pretty consistent with my thoughts as well. Look, it's the very first property. You don't need to, buy in trusts or anything like that at this stage, especially if Morgan hasn't sort of given you any indication or any advice on buying in a trust, because as we know, currently there is a bit of a thing where if you start or buy in trusts, and you can potentially extend your borrowing capacity or your serviceability for a longer period. But if they're advising don't do it, then you don't need to, right? But, interest only, I'm always a big advocate of that if you can get it. I like to set up offset accounts with all the interest only loans that I have against the resi houses I have. And, whatever cash you have left, savings or whatever, just chuck it in the offset account. That does exactly the same as paying off the principal, but you can access the cash anytime. And, you don't have to redraw or refinance down the track to get that cash out, right? So just more control over your money, interest only terms, typically 5 years. But, at every 5-year interval, I tend to, talk to my broker and see if I can renew it for another 5 years. And if I can, great. So yeah, that's all pretty good. Now, what was it? 350 for the owner occupier?
350 owner occ, or 550 is if it's an investment property with some guarantor help.
All right. So as you know, I'm a big, at this current point in time, 2025, I am still a massive advocate of buying in major capital cities only, right? Not only because you get growth, but the growth is consistent. The growth is also sustainable. If we look at recent history, even in the past 10, 20 years, all the growth has happened in Sydney and Brisbane and now Perth. It's gone up and it stays there, right? And the reason why it stays there is because it's backed up by lots of population, lots of migration. And the reason why people populate and migrate in major capital cities is because that's where all the jobs are. Mm-hmm. That's where the communities are. That's where their families are, the good schools, the lifestyle, the shopping centers, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, I'm not suggesting regional areas don't grow. In fact, there's tons of evidence that tons of regional areas do grow, but it's a massive gamble. And also they tend to be very volatile. They go up, they go down, depending on the hype, because all these areas are primarily investor driven. You get tons and tons of people suddenly moving to a small regional town because it's obviously not sustainable for most people to live in small regional towns. So sticking to major capital cities only, at 350, you're not getting anything. I wouldn't even bother. So my advice there, if that's the path that you're going to go down, just wait, right? Don't buy any properties at all, and the difference isn't that big, right? Like if you go 350, even up to 450, you're suddenly, opening yourself up to maybe like a townhouse or a villa or something like that. If your intention is to buy a house to live in. So it's not a huge amount of time, like 100 grand. I know 100 grand is a lot of money, but in terms of how much you have to save up, it may only be an extra 10 or 20 grand. And also, the rest of the 80 odd thousand dollars, you can potentially borrow more down the track as well, especially if your income starts to change. I believe you're lucky, if you can correct me as well, you're looking at a bit of an income hike, in the short term as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I would put that off the table completely. Now with the 550k investor loan, with your mum going guarantor, number one, just double check and make sure that your mum's happy to go guarantor.
Yep.
Very, very important.
She's in the other room right now. She's pretty happy. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yep. She's physically there at
yes.
the time of recording. We have a few witnesses here. So. No, it's always important when you get family to help,
don't assume.
Yeah, don't assume, and, that's when things can sometimes get hairy down the track as well. So from the investment property perspective, a 550k budget, it's unlikely you're going to find a decent first-time investor type property as a house. Right. So I would suggest that if Lachie were to be buying an investment property, you're probably going to be opening up yourself to villas or townhouses. Do you think that could be a concern for you, Lachie?
No, 100%. That's definitely the path I'd want to go down. But why is it that houses will boom first and then townhouses and villas will then boom afterwards and not at the same time?
Look, if you look at boom cycles, especially, some of the more recent ones like Brisbane, the Brisbane boom started around about 2017-ish, if I remember correctly. And at the time, houses were extremely affordable. We were buying houses for around about $300,000, in areas like Logan and Ipswich and the more sort of bread and butter areas. Now, once those houses start growing, or Brisbane in general starts booming, these houses move very rapidly. So they jump from 300 to 600-700K very, very quickly, right, in a matter of a few years. Now, at a certain point, the people that were buying those houses start to find them unaffordable, or maybe less affordable. I wouldn't say unaffordable, but less affordable. And then they start to think, hold on, houses and like, let's say we're looking at a particular suburb, houses are now $600 odd, $700 odd thousand dollars. But the townhouses and villas were still at that sort of $200,000 mark, right? So the gap is huge. And people start to compromise. They go, okay, cool. Instead of buying a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house for $600-700 grand, maybe I should buy a townhouse or villa for $200,000 or $300,000 for such a huge price discount. And then that stuff starts moving. So if you look at Logan and Ipswich and Kalanga, when those townhouses and villas started moving, it was really around about the sort of 2020, 2021 time when you could still pick up a 3-bedroom townhouse or villa for around about, I think it was, if I remember correctly, around that kind of price range, $300,000-400,000 grand. And now all those townhouses and villas are even $600,000 now. So it happens in stages. Now I'm still a big advocate of not buying units, right? At least with villas and townhouses, you still own some portion of land underneath it, right? But at some stage, especially if you have your budget of 550, you're buying at least like a mid-level villa or townhouse rather than buying an absolute compromising house, which could be like a really old house that needs a lot of work. The house may be in a compromised position or a location or all of the above. And for someone like yourself, where you're starting out full of optimism, full of confidence, you've got a long road ahead of you. I'm not saying those old houses don't make money, but sometimes it may be a little bit, jumping too deep, to begin with. Yeah, still not a big fan of units. Townhouses or villas only, is kind of like the bare bottom of where we'd buy. But just to give you an example, Lachie, or actually maybe two examples, we bought a villa back in April for a client in a suburb called Armadale, which is in Perth. And it's a 3-bedroom villa. The contract price at the time was $410,000, and the valuation that he just did yesterday, actually, and this is the reason why I thought it might be relevant to talk about. The valuation came back at $110,000 more, right? So that's almost 30% more than what we paid. And that's the other thing with these properties at a low price point; they can jump very quickly. That $100,000, $200,000 jump, in terms of what people can afford and what people can borrow is really nominal. But in the context of the percentage of the property, it's a huge amount. And the house at that particular property at the moment is rented for about $500 per week. So you're looking at about just over 6% rental yield from the purchase price. And I think that would definitely help you, even with, I think this house only had, this villa, if I remember correctly, only had a $500 per quarter of strata, of body corporate. So not a huge amount, but you're still at least closer to being cash flow neutral.
And when you take into account that a lot of the time that actually includes your building insurance, then really when you take a look at the strata, it's peanuts. It's hardly anything. Yeah. But what I'm really hearing from you here, Simon, is you want Lachie to look for areas. I mean, first and foremost, don't just buy for the sake of buying. That's like the headline of this conversation. Second of all, if you are going to buy something and you're committed to moving forward with it, make sure that you're buying somewhere where there's actually that discrepancy in value, like you're describing, somewhere where houses have really grown and maybe like townhouses and villas have still got that gap, making sure that you're still getting something with a good yield to it, but a bit more of a land component. But I know Lachie had a few questions around how does he actually find areas like this? Because it feels like so much of the country has just gone crazy. He's kind of looking at this naturally through a lens of an 18-year-old going, everything's expensive. Everywhere I'm looking around where I live, you're not buying anything for even 500. Where would you advise him to start on the where aspect?
Look, Perth and even Adelaide, where you guys are at, I think are still good capital city markets where there is still a lot of suburbs or areas where they're undervalued or at least have a lot of potential for growth. They're still super affordable. And these may not be areas that you find, sexy or nice for now. But as a city grows and as things become unaffordable, these are the areas that become the next, middle class areas. So, like I mentioned, Armadale and Gosnells in WA is one example, or in Perth is one example where I still think there's a lot of value there, especially in the context of the location and its proximity to the city. And yes, it's had a bit of a negative stigma, but that's changing very rapidly and has changed. I think one very important point that I want to give Lachie as well is when you're buying townhouses or villas, you have to be very mindful that you're not buying at the start of a boom cycle within that city. If you were to buy a townhouse or a villa in Gosnells or Armadale like 4 years ago, I think that would have been a mistake, because houses at the time were super affordable. You should have just bought a house. But now that those houses in Armadale and Gosnells are, around about $600,000-$700,000 retail, that's the reason why these sort of 400, 450, I don't think you can get these for 400 anymore, but let's say 450 odd thousand for a 3-bedroom villa starts to make a lot of sense because that gap has widened. So looking for these areas, and perhaps in Adelaide, City of Playford, plenty of those kinds of suburbs out there, I feel like are next in line for gentrification. So, without giving away too much, those are some of the areas that I think would be suitable.
Perfect. Thank you for that one. What are the other problems you might find with buying and trying to rent out in cheaper areas? Do you find you have more problems with tenants and any other problems like that?
It's a very good question, Lachie, and I get asked this a lot, especially by new investors, because there is a assumption that nicer areas bring in nicer tenants. What I've actually found is quite the opposite. I find nicer areas charge a higher rent, in general, for any property. So the type of people type of tenants you might come across are, a demographic that may not be requiring that property super long term, or they may be a little bit more picky about the physical aspects of the house or the property itself, right? So if you're paying $1,000 a week plus or $2,000 a week as a tenant, you kind of expect the house to be quite perfect. And if there is anything that goes wrong, you're going to let the landlord know about it. Whereas with some of these quote unquote bread and butter areas, again, a lot of the tenants are young families, maybe lower income families, but they might be just requiring something that's a roof over their heads. Right. And even within a suburb, there's different levels or different grades of property. And whether you have the super nice house at a higher price point or a more sort of average house at a lower price point, there's always a tenant. There's always a market for that affordable property in any major capital city. But the key is always tenant selection. Whether you're renting in a super expensive area or a super cheap area, getting the right tenant is super, super important. And if you get the right tenant in one of these more sort of affordable areas, you get a super happy tenant, grateful tenant. They're not going to be too fussy. Obviously, if you treat them right as well, without, crazy rent hikes and, just be a decent landlord, you actually get a lot more stability with these types of properties, I find.
I know Lachie had a few questions for you around renovation as well. And you and I have talked about reno a lot. And I know you're not against reno, but you're not exactly a massive fan of reno. With his skill set and limited time, budget, well, actually not time you got lots of, but limited cash flow at the moment and also capital, is this an exception that you'd go, yeah, man, okay, maybe you are in a good position to actually add some value? What's your thoughts?
I would say no.
And why is that?
From what I know, Lockie's pretty determined to build a large portfolio fairly quickly, right? And if your goal is to, achieve that sort of long-term passive income and buy lots of properties in the short term, every dollar that you have in capital, whether it's savings or equity, should be going into more houses. Right. But also it's I guess, how much mental capacity you have to deal with what's on your plate. And if you buy a property right now that's, you're new to renovation and all this kind of stuff, it might be a little bit too overwhelming, and you'll learn tons, right? It'll be a great experience, but it might sort of just hold you back in terms of building that portfolio in the short term as well, right? And the other thing I want to say is, like, when you're renovating a property, like to renovate, let's say a $800,000 property versus a $400,000 property is pretty much the same, to repaint, recarpet, the fixtures and fittings, you're going to have to spend yeah, exactly. So when you're renovating a lower grade or lower value property, and let's say, $550,000 or $500,000, and you're spending $50,000 on this reno, that's 10% of the value of the property that you're renovating. And then you're going to stick tenants in, and they're going to do their wear and tear thing over the next several years, that you're going to be owning the place. Every new thing you put in is going to be worth less as in depreciation. So sometimes it's not worth it, like, for an extra, $50 or whatever it is a week of rents that you might get from that reno. Like, I would much prefer, Lachie, to just buy a place that's, look, it doesn't need to be perfect, as long as it's clean, safe and tidy, rentable. You might need to fix up a few little things here and there, but buy it, rent it out and move on. Like that example I gave you, if you buy well, you can make 100 grand equity within, a space of 6 to 12 months anyway, just by sitting on your hands. So why go to the effort of doing this reno, unless you genuinely love doing it, but that's a different conversation, I guess. So purely from a numbers perspective, I generally avoid them. I like to do renos when I sell the house, because
top dollar.
That's when you get top dollar and you attract some emotional buyers. But while you have it, it's not about being a slumlord. It's not just about renting out dilapidated properties. But if it's good enough to rent out and there's a market for it, then happy days.
Okay, so it's not that you're against reno, but you look at it and kind of go, there's an easier option if you buy well, and then if you buy that in a market where there's some value discrepancy and it's actually really got legs to move up. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, reno might add you some value, but it's a lot more effort in comparison to that as an option. Have I understood you right?
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
Simon, I know you like to try find a good buy and then just get a tenant in there pretty much immediately, as long as it's already nice, clean, tidy and livable. What are some of the best ways you build reform with real estate agents? What are one of the better ways to find cheap properties?
Look, I'll be upfront with you, and this isn't me just kind of go, you need to work with a professional or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
I think everyone knows what I do by now, but
it's work.
It's not easy to, when you're an individual, especially someone at your age, to get access to distressed sellers or off-market deals.
Yeah.
And by the way, just because a house is off-market, it doesn't automatically mean it's a good deal, right? In fact, I would say the off markets that I see, only about 20% of them or less are good deals. The rest, or 80% of them, are still not good deals, or they're just still asking for top dollar without wanting to pay for marketing and so on. But I would say a lot of time, if you were to go it alone, a lot of time, a lot of building rapport with agents, physically going there and building a lot of trust. You're not going to get a lot of, you may not get the same amount of agents that are willing to sort of show their cards in terms of these distressed or off-market properties, because there is a bit of a taboo where, if you're selling a property off-market, you may not be doing the best thing by the seller, by the vendor, because everyone knows the best way to sell a market is to put it online and do fancy photos and stage it and, lots of open homes and phone calls and stuff like that. But the reality is a lot of properties can't go through that process, or maybe the seller or the selling agent doesn't want to go through that process if it's a particularly challenging situation or property to sell. So, yeah, the agent needs to trust you, needs to trust that you're not a time waster, needs to trust that you're not going to do the wrong thing by the agents as well. And the way that we do it is by building a rapport, and that rapport typically comes from doing a lot of business or buying lots of properties to build that trust. But obviously, as an individual, that might be a little bit difficult to do.
So, Simon, I can see that Lachie's got determination. I think he's probably still going to give this a go. I do know exactly what you're talking about, how difficult it is to actually buy a deal off market. Not every off market is a deal. But what's one big takeaway that you can give to him that maybe something you wish you had in your early days that's going to make this process run smoother for him?
Look, Todd, I think the answer to that question is actually leveraging the genuine situation that Lachie is in. He's an 18-year-old go-getter with 3 jobs. If he were just to approach agents with that story, so many agents would love to work with someone like this, just purely out of the fact that it's like mind-blowing, that an 18-year-old is in this particular situation, $80,000 saved up off his own back. He's thinking about investing in property rather than partying and going on holidays and all these other stupid stuff that a lot of people at his age are doing. And if you're just genuine about it, if you just approach them and look, hey, I've got a bit of a budget, I'm looking to invest, I don't mind doing a little bit of work, I don't mind a house that's a little bit run down, or a villa that's a little bit run down, what do you got that I can potentially buy? I think that'll go a long way, And I think, look, I don't want to say agents are going to take, sympathy isn't the right word, but maybe like an empathy to that situation. And they're just, I think just the willingness to help, as part of that foundation and that process. I think that will actually, that's something that I don't have, and I think a lot of investors don't have out there.
It's so true. The whole reason
they'll treat you a little bit differently.
Sorry to jump in there and stuff, but you're absolutely right. Like even when I very first got the phone call to sit down, if I had the call and it was, he's 28 years old and he's just starting, we wouldn't be making this right now. But as soon as I heard you were 17, you're about to, I was like, how much has he had saved? What is he doing? Sure, I'll get behind this. Like, I'll help out as much as I can. I give Simon a call. He has the exact same response. I'll help this kid out. This is amazing. So I think you're bang on there, man. I think if you really leverage this, Lachie, and actually make sure that you're not just a voice on the other end, they know you're an 18-year-old dude working 3 jobs with 80K in savings, that can open up a lot more doors.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I like that's what I would do. Coming to what I would do when I first start, just look at your own situation and see what you can leverage, really. What can you use to your advantage to get on an agent's good side? If I look back, that's kind of what I did a lot as well, maybe more in language rather than the personal situation, but whatever it takes, Lachie.
Show them what I can bring to the table and make a deal happen.
Absolutely. And there's probably so many of you guys listening right now, whether you're a single mum, whether you're a young couple, whether you're a young family, like there's an angle, there is a thing that you can have and try and establish an emotional connection with. I don't think I had one when I was starting out because I was a young drunk. It's like, hey, help the guy that's got a problem.
Maybe that could have been your angle. Just rock up to open inspection with just tanks. Yeah, exactly. They'll be like, oh man, I feel sorry for this guy. I need to help him. I would have given you a good deal.
All right, Simon. So essentially wrapping this up, we're looking at Lachie buying something that as long as it's got that real value gap to it, preferably a villa or a townhouse, not a unit. If he can add some value, then that's something that's a cool lever to be able to pull. However, focus on the lever that is potentially less effort, being able to actually buy better, buying a location that's actually got some real upside for growth, buying an asset that's actually got some real upside for growth, instead of putting in so much sweat equity into something that maybe doesn't doesn't have all of those levers that can be pulled with a lot more ease. Making sure as well that he doesn't overextend himself and just buy for the sake of buying, because like you said, the FOMO side of things can end up putting you into an asset that a few years later you end up going, what the hell? Why do I do this? Anything else I've missed there, mate?
No, I think that's good. And, steady as she goes, I think, is another big one. Again, don't feel rushed. If you don't feel like it's the right deal, don't do it. There's always another opportunity, another property, another bargain. So just stick to that, and I think you'll do well. But you're already doing well, honestly, so well done.
And location-wise, either you're looking Perth or potentially Adelaide, which I'm assuming Adelaide's going to feel more comfortable, just so you can, like Jez said, touch it, feel it, smell it. It's nearby.
Yeah, that would probably be the plan, to get the first one in Adelaide, and then for the second and third, see what's around.
Amazing.
Yeah, sounds good.
Fantastic. Simon Lou from House Finder, as always, mate, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm glad I made you laugh at the end, so everyone watching is going to be very happy.
Yeah, there's a laugh for you all.
Thanks again, man.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All the best. Bye.
All right, Lachie. Before we start unpacking this with Simon, mate, let's run through the whole list, because I know this is a lot to take in for anyone. When you're at the absolute start of the journey, which obviously you are, mate, it's even more. So can you give me some quick bullet points? What's the biggest thing you've taken away, first of all, from Jeremy at the very beginning?
It was really good to talk with Jeremy, especially because I've heard a lot of positive things about trust, and it was really good to talk with someone face to face and understand that trusts aren't actually as good for a first property as what I thought.
That's the thing. It's not the be all and end all. They've got a lot of good points to them, and used correctly can be amazing to grow your portfolio, but it doesn't mean that it's amazing in every single situation. I think that's a brilliant takeaway, mate. What about if we move on to Morgan? What about around borrowing?
Morgan, it was really good to talk about the guarantor, because right from before we got professional help, it was something that we're going to try avoid doing. But now I think after talking with everyone, it's most definitely the best option. I think that's what we're going to roll with.
Awesome. So guarantor. And how about last but not least, Simon, who we've just got off the call with?
It was really good to talk with him about what areas are good, what to look for, and how places will actually start to boom, on how houses will boom first, and then townhouses and villas will follow.
So I feel like if you can pick the right area, and realistically right now we're in Adelaide, so Adelaide's gone through a pretty awesome cycle already, but if it's more so the houses that have gone through this, like further to Simon's point, you're not looking at buying a house anyway. You're potentially looking at buying a villa with the price range that you've got of that 550 being the cap.
Yeah.
So you may actually be at a pretty good time depending on where. Simon also saying that Playford area, like if you're looking around there, so and anyone that's from interstate, so he's talking around that kind of Elizabeth, Salisbury, Brahma Lodge, Davern Park, like all of those kinds of areas looped in. But something that I really wanted to really impress upon you, mate, and again, for everyone listening, right now I want you to think of yourself as like the captain of the ship, okay? You've just spoken to an amazing crew, but it's still your ship. You need to make the decisions, because even if you've got the best people around you, it's still your job to steer the ship in the direction that you feel is the best. And it's something that I think sometimes we get lost in. And this is about saying that your professionals that you surround yourself with, listen, but sometimes you might get a little bit of conflicting information. Like we've just seen here, Simon, not as much of a fan of renovating. Jeremy, he's looking at it going, mate, if I had your skills, I would have been renovating like from the get-go.
Yeah.
And this is where you've got to take all the information on and start processing it yourself as the captain of the ship to go, what actually sits the best for me, for my situation that I think I'm going to move ahead with? Because at the end of the day, in a few years' time, success or fail, it's all going to come back to the choices that you make based on all of the information that you're getting, man.
Yeah, it was really good to talk with everyone and then get an idea of what everyone's beliefs are. And I'll be able to pinch points from everything they've said and then kind of run my own way with it.
What are you leaning towards? I know it's early days, like we've literally just finished, but what are you thinking?
Before walking in, it was going to be renovation, but after talking with Simon Lou, it's really started to make me want to go home tonight and really spend all night studying to see what other people have do and what the other options are.
Love it. Let's give you some action steps, okay? Because I want to make sure that you don't leave here feeling all pumped up and then it's kind of like, okay, but where to from here? So the first action step is generally find out what you can borrow. You've done that, nailed that. You've understood around the trust, you're structuring, like you're already along the path here. Now, I feel like the action steps that you need to start putting into practice, there's a few of them, or even if we keep it at 3. First of all, choose an area or a couple of areas. Narrow it down. And whether you are going to go more Perth, like Simon was saying, or more like Playford, like Adelaide, wherever it is, choose it.
Yep.
Okay, because if you try and look a little bit of everywhere, the next step is going to be it's not going to work time-wise. The next thing you want to do is find a handful of agents and call, okay? And when I say call, this is the best way to do it. And again, for anyone listening at home, it's like if you're trying to, you and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand, if you're trying to get into reading, don't try and tell yourself you're going to read half an hour every day or an hour every day, because then you'll find all these excuses not to. You tell yourself you're just going to read one page, because everyone's got 30 seconds to read a page. You cannot be like, oh, I'm too busy, I don't have 30 seconds. For you, one phone call every single day to an agent to start establishing that connection, because I guarantee you, there are some days that you just make the phone call, but you'll feel so good about yourself because you've done the thing that you said you're going to do. And when your words and your actions keep aligning, that's serious character growth right there. And the other part of it is you're going to find that you will make another phone call. You'll be sitting there and you're like, oh, I got another 10 minutes left, 20 minutes left, whatever. And before you know it, you've made 3 or 4 or 5 phone calls. But building that consistent habit, this is the thing that Simon is brilliant at. And it's why he's built such an amazing portfolio and a business, because he's so good at it. But it's not a skill that you can't learn. But it is a skill that will require consistency and effort. More to the point, back when what Jeremy was saying, what was he talking about? The mechanic that never earned over 6 figures.
Yeah.
But he had consistency. Every day you can keep this consistency. So choose your area first, then choose a few suburbs within that area, then choose a few agents to actually contact, and then commit to 1 phone call minimum per day of actually staying in touch.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions you've got for me at all on that, mate?
No, not really. I was just a massive thank you for your time and effort of putting this all together and getting everyone to listen to my story and be able to express my story and get the one-on-one help that's really going to help me get over the line.
Right, well, I'm looking forward to seeing the man that you become as you start growing up as an investor. But otherwise, Lachie, thank you so much for jumping on the show, man. And I'm sure we'll be chatting again real soon.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you.
Now, I am so proud to say that Lachie, a few months later, we stayed in touch and he missed out on a few. There was a couple of properties that he got so close to, but there's several reasons that I'm really proud of him for this, is that he didn't overbid at certain auctions that looked like they were a really good deal, but then someone was just paying way overs for them. He held his guns. He stuck to the frameworks, the advice that he got from his experts, and he ended up securing a property that's ticking the boxes for him. I want to actually revisit this with Lachie, and I don't know if he's going to jump on a slice and we can actually jump into more of the details of this, but I wanted to wrap this episode up with Lachie's result. And I'm going to be following this guy, like, not in a creepy way, the other way. I don't tend to follow 18-year-olds around, but I'm going to be following Lachie's journey to help him continue to grow. Because when I meet a young person, or any person for that matter, I'm just more impressed when it's his age, like just turning 18. It's insane. It's nuts. But when I meet anyone that's got that much get up and go, that much chutzpah, that want for success, that tunes out all of the BS that's around us, because there is so much that will tell you are going to fail. Like if you want to Google it, and it rates so well, you look at it, there's hundreds of thousands of views on the stuff that tells everything's about to implode and it's all rigged and you're all scammed. And go look at Gary's Economics if you ever want to feel helpless and tell you the whole system's against you and there's nothing you can do about it. Here's an 18-year-old young man who's an apprentice who has just got into his first property. I'm going to say that again. Here's an 18-year-old young man who is an apprentice who has just got into his first property. And Lachie, I am so proud of you, mate. You are going to absolutely kill it moving forward. You've got success written all over you. And if you're listening to this thinking, well, I can't do it because of insert reason, you can. You absolutely can. And Lachie is living proof that doesn't matter where you're born. He's from the dirty South just like I am. Doesn't matter if you come from money. He, just like me, does not come from money. What matters is the push you've got. What matters is the want that you've actually got to succeed, to make that thing that you really, you can do into reality.